אחרי שסיימנו את ההקדמות, אני רוצה לעבור, קודם כל לפנות, לאחד ממקורות ההשראה שלי ושל רבים רבים בעולם הקיימות של עסקים, ג'ואל מקובר, המייסד, יושב ראש והעורך הראשי של קבוצת GreenBiz, הוא סופר, מרצה וחוקר, הוא מכונה הגורו של העסקים הירוקים, והוא היום איתנו בהשכמה מוקדמת, כל הדרך מקליפורניה. Dear Joel, good morning and congratulations on your new president, whose first act was to reconfirm the Paris Agreement. It was great to see it. I just introduced you saying that you were appointed as the guru of green business practices and that you are the source of my inspiration when it comes to business sustainability. Joel, the floor is yours.
Toda, Erev Tov, everyone. Shmi Yoel Makower and ani lo medber ivrit. So apologies for speaking in my own tongue. I wish I could speak with you and yours. But it's a great pleasure to be here. It really is. And thank you, Talia, for so much for inviting me and for also showing the way for so many years around what responsible business and sustainable business looks like in Israel. It's you've been a leading light for many decades now, and I thank you for that. Let me cue up the slides here and get that going. And this is an extraordinary time to be having this conversation, and it's not just because of President Biden and the Paris Agreement or anything else. This year, last year, this moment is really extraordinary. And just to give you a little bit of a level set, I wanted to sort of just show you where we are and ask you to imagine wherever you get your news, online or offline, on TV, internet, wherever it is. And what if you were to see the following headlines? That one of the largest retailers in the UK had just announced that they had removed 1 billion pieces of plastic from its UK business, or that one of the largest and best known consumer electronics companies in the world announced that they were going to modify their executive cash bonuses based on whether the executives act within the company's social or environmental values. Or that one of the largest food companies in the world said it plans to invest nearly $800 billion over the next decade in not just in responsible sourcing of its coffee brand, but also to reduce the emissions of that product to meet the 2050 carbon reduction goals. Or they were the largest consumer products company in the world had announced that they were going to pay at least a minimum wage to anyone who directly provides goods and services to the company by 2030. And in the process, they also wanted to work with suppliers to create 10 million jobs for young people, by the end of this decade. Or that the largest investment company in the world had just published a temperature alignment metric, looking at where the companies that they're investing in are aligned with the temperature goals, the 1.5 or 2 degree goals of Paris Agreement or the SDGs. Or finally that, hearing some interesting noise, there we go. Or finally that one of the largest airplane manufacturers in the world had set a target that by the end of this decade, they will have planes certified to fly based on 100% sustainable aviation fuels. So if you were to see those headlines, you'd say, I don't know, maybe wow, or that's interesting, or I had no idea. Well, all of that happened this month. and I seem to be, there we go. All of that happened during January. And you may notice that January isn't over yet. And all of that happens, all of this happens every month. In fact, I have been starting presentations like this for maybe 15 years to level set and look at what's been going on. And this has been going on during good times and bad times, during different political administrations, during recessions and boom times, obviously during pandemics and all. So this has been a very robust time to be looking at this world, because every year, not only are there more and more of these commitments, but the bar keeps rising. So we've gotten to a point where companies are now starting to ask the question, what's our sustainability strategy? Not all of them know exactly what that question means, but they kind of know they need to have one. And if you plot it out, as I do here on a standard bell curve, on the left side are a relatively small number of companies who are just talking the talk and not really doing much, or making a few statements, but not really backing it up with action. Greenwash, as some people call it. In the big fat middle are companies that are committing what I call random acts of greenness, which is to say they could be product related, they could be facility related, they could be community engagement related, they could be philanthropy, they could be supply chain related, and they may be significant and bold kinds of initiatives, but there's still a series of disconnected dots. But at the far right of that are the companies that are now starting to say, how do we operate in a world where energy, water, carbon, toxicity, and waste materials become constraints to growth? And also, what are the opportunities that come out of that? And those are fascinating conversations. So we've moved from a period where companies were making inadvertent negative impacts to one where they're having deliberately positive impacts. And that's a really interesting time to be looking at how can companies not just do no harm, but actually be restorative and regenerative. And those are words that sound kind of, California woo-woo in a way. And that's where I am right now. But this is actually baked into the strategy of more and more of the world's largest companies. So everybody wants to know, well, what's the business case for sustainability? As if there's a business case for trashing the planet. But I have an old answer and a new answer. And the old answer is the one you've probably seen many, many times. It's sort of this litany of things that companies recite. Probably many of you in your sustainability reports or in your presentations to audiences like this, that it's about revenue growth and efficiencies and cutting costs. It's about innovation. It's about the ability to attract capital or attract and retain talent, or being, if you're part of a supply chain, being seen as a good or preferred supplier. And then of course there's the brand value and reputational part, which I always put last, mostly because so many people out there in the world think that that's the primary reason why companies are doing this, to green up their reputation. And the reality is that contrary to what most people think, this is an area where companies are walking more than they're talking. They're doing more than they're saying. That's an interesting phenomenon. We can get into that perhaps a little bit later. But as I said, this is my old answer for the business case. And it's not untrue, but really the business case now boils down to one word: risk. This is so much about risk, plain and simple. And there's lots of different kinds of risk in business. Obviously, there's financial risk and the reputational risk, supply chain continuity risk, the risk of investing in or owning stranded assets that have no value, the simple license to operate. If you're a significant water user, your business in a water stressed area, you may not be able to open a facility, or you may have to close or reduce output at an existing one. So risk is really a growing part of this, and the conversation inside companies between the risk department and the sustainability department is just starting to, they don't even speak the same language yet, but this is a conversation that's getting going. And as it is, sustainability is aligning with corporate strategy. And so we've gone through this sort of flipping the script these days from the old conversation about what's the impact of business on the climate to what's the impact of climate on business? What's the risk of a world in a changing climate? And by the way, it's not just climate, it's about water, it's about biodiversity, which about over a third of our economy is based on biodiversity, an abundance of plants and animals and other things, ecosystems. And so this is where the conversation has shifted. And one of the most remarkable things about 2020, a year that had many, many remarkable things, is that during the year, sustainability stayed on the agenda. And that's why, because this is about risk, and this is about strategy, and this is about reputation, and this is about money and the cost of money and so many other things. Not only did sustainability stay on the agenda during this time of recession and a pandemic and social unrest and political upheaval in my country and yours, that it not only stayed on the agenda, but it actually became more and more embedded throughout the company. That is to say that sustainability executives who used to be seen as sort of the sideline, as, you know, somebody that didn't really have much to do with the business of business. It was a philanthropy or CSR or some other thing that wasn't seen as core. And all of a sudden, this is being seen as core. And so therefore, there are now sustainability champions in government relations, in investor relations, in supply chain, in finance, in energy procurement, and so many other parts of the business. And that's sort of a remarkable story of what happened over the past year, when we would have thought in past recessions and past economic bad times, sustainability, as we say, got thrown under the bus. It just sort of got pushed aside. Now it's very much on the bus. It may even be driving the bus on some days. And that's a big, big change. And so one of those changes, and I heard it mentioned during the introduction here, is the rise of all of this for investors with environmental, social, and governance metrics. This is not new. This has been around for a long, long time. ESG has been part of the conversation for 10 or 15 years, but it's really only the past few years that we have started to see this going from the margins of socially responsible investing and impact investing and things for people who wanted to make sure their money was put into a virtuous investment, to it's now sitting right in the middle of Wall Street. This is part and parcel of what finance is about. And the amount of money that's going into funds, and the amount of funds that are now growing and being created every day, whether they're mutual funds or exchange traded funds or bond funds or other kinds of funds that focus on ESG data is interesting. And what's also fascinating, and one of the reasons this is growing, is that over the past year, we saw that ESG funds did very, very well. That the headlines said that they outperformed traditional funds, and they were having a positive impact on investment portfolios. And this is now not lost on some of the biggest Wall Street firms. In fact, during 2020, 81% of the sustainable indexes that these funds are based on outperformed their benchmarks, the main benchmarks that they use, the S&P 500, the S&P 1200, the FTSE indexes, and all the others, the Russell, all of those indexes, it outperformed them. And companies with a better ESG profile are performing better than their peers. They're enjoying what is now being called a sustainability premium. Now, if you follow this stuff, you probably saw that yesterday, Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, the largest investment company in the world with $8.7 trillion of assets under management, issued his annual letter to shareholders and to the companies in their portfolio, 2 different letters actually. And it's always something that everyone looks at. It's one of those moments that happens during Davos week, and this would have been Davos week had there been a Davos, and it's now the Davos dialogues this week. But some of the reports still come out, including this one. And he said in this letter yesterday that companies with a well-articulated long-term strategy and a clear path to address the transition to net zero carbon emissions will distinguish themselves with customers, policymakers, employees, and shareholders by inspiring confidence that they can navigate this global transformation. There's a lot of interesting terms in there, but one of the last ones is the end of that global transformation that we've been assuming in the world of sustainability and even in the world of investing and just in the world, that tomorrow is going to be pretty much like today or some version of today. I mean, this has changed obviously during the pandemic when things are being disrupted, and life after the pandemic will be a little bit different or maybe a lot different. But we also assuming that we will, the kinds of products we buy, for example, the way we do business, the way we look at the economy and the flows of energy and materials and everything else will be relatively the same. And that's not the case here, is that we are going through this global transformation. And we're doing it at a time of, as I said, of incredible challenges. And so we've been seeing these really 5 crises all at once: the coronavirus pandemic crisis, a social justice crisis, a financial crisis, a biodiversity crisis, and of course, a climate crisis. And, you know, in some ways, you know, they're all very different and they're all coming at us at different times, at different scales, with different levels of urgency, but they also share a lot of things in common. They all have to do with individual responsibility combined with collective action, a global response, making bold commitments and even bolder, quicker, decisive actions. You know, the earlier you start looking at solutions, the faster it will be. And ultimately, how do we flatten the curve, whatever that is, whether it's the carbon emissions curve, obviously the pandemic curve, the curve of biodiversity loss that's going to have a significant impact on profits and productivity in the years ahead, and everything else. How do we do this? How do we think of them, not just as individual crises, which they definitely are, but also connected, because they're very much connected. Climate change and social justice, climate change and the pandemic, climate change and the economy. All of these things are really part of some of the same challenges and some of the same fundamental restructures that need to happen in our economy. The good news, and this is where I spend so much of my day, is looking at solutions. And there are so many of them. We do a whole conference based on this slide, in effect, around technology and sustainability, and looking at everything from renewable energy and water efficiency to 3D printing, machine learning, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, synthetic biology, microgrids, and on and on. You can see them all here. When individually, these are very powerful tools, but when they start to come together and converge in various ways, when energy storage and microgrids and machine learning come together, just to pick 3, you start to see how do we create resilient energy systems at the community level that are less vulnerable to things like wildfires or earthquakes or floods or anything else that comes. And how do we create homes in those communities that are able to be resilient during times of energy shutdowns or energy shortages or anything else? Just one of hundreds of examples. And that's what's so exciting, is that the technology combined with the growing understanding that we are going through a fundamental shift, that is what makes this moment so exciting. What gets me out of bed every day, thinking about all that's possible. And I've been doing this for over 30 years, looking at what the opportunities are around sustainability in business. How do we rethink business, rethink products, services, and even business models in a way that aligns with not just the planet's priorities, but also human priorities? How does this not just be better for the planet, but create opportunities for everyone, jobs and careers, and the life's basic essentials, that affordably, food, energy, water, shelter, healthcare. How do these come together? And that's this exciting moment that we are in. Out of these challenges is great opportunity. So just to wrap up, when you put all these things together, the fact that we've got so many companies doing everything every day, there's so many of these announcements and achievements, that this is part of a much bigger strategy that companies are starting to take in, and that a lot of it is based on how do we not just mitigate risk, but turn risk into opportunity. And how do we leverage that with not just at the business level, but at the societal level or the global level, with all of these various challenges and crises that we have? How do we align that with the money flows? That the cost of money increasingly is being tied to a company's ESG performance and ratings and rankings. And then how do we leverage technology in service of all of these challenges and turn them into the opportunities that we have all done, you have done very much with water and so many other technological innovations that have helped not just in Israel, but around the world. This is an enormous opportunity. So I'm very excited for that. I'm excited for the conversation you'll be having this evening, and for all that you do. Thank you for being part of the conversation. Thank you for your commitment to understanding and hopefully embracing so many of these challenges. And thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you for being that optimistic fit, actually, that, and I can tell our participants that you were actually the first person who came to Israel just as we started Ma'ala here, when we still thought that corporate social responsibility was only about community investment. You were the one giving me a call and saying, well, I'm here and I'm willing to run a workshop for some leaders, business leaders, and explain to them why environment can become a business asset. And you go on with this optimistic, very realistic and pragmatic spirit of yours. And I really thank you for that. And thank you for getting up so early to join us. Thanks.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
Shalom.
Shalom.